Okay, so welcome to our Yoga Well discussion hour for the month of April. The goal of these is to address some sort of topic that has importance for us as a community and to just offer a time for us to get together. Um, like all the things we do, we'll start by chanting as a way of acknowledging that uh, we can only do the things that we do here because of the effort and care, attention and love and work of the teachers that uh, came before us. And so we just do some chanting to acknowledge that debt, thank them. And then the topic for today is nurturing relationships in the face of apathy. So we'll talk about that in a minute. First, some chanting. Om Shuklam Bharadharam Vishnum Shashivarnan Chaturbhujam Prasanna Vadanandhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye यस्यद्विरडद्वक्त्राद्याः पौरिषद्यपरशतं विघ्नन्निघ्नन्ति सततं विश्वक्सेनन्तमाश्रये ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् अधरन् सर्वविद्यानां हयग्रीवमुपास्महे पुण्डरीकासनासीनं पाण्डुरभृन्दुसन्निभम् अखण्डबोधजनकं हयग्रीवमुपास्महे गुरुभ्यस्तद्गुरुभ्यश्च नमो वाकमधीमहे वर्णीमहे छत्थद्राद्यौ दम्पती जगतापति श्रीकृष्णवागीशयतीश्वराभ्यां सम्प्राप्तचक्राङ्कणभाष्यसारम् श्रीनोनारेङ्गेन्द्रयतौ समर्पितस्वं श्रीकृष्णमार्यं गुरुवर्यमीडे विरोधे कार्तिके मासे शतताराकृतोदयम् योगाचार्यं कृष्णमार्यम् गुरुवार्यमहं भजे कृष्णसूरिदयापात्रं ज्ञानवैराग्यभूषणं श्रीमद्वेङ्कटनाथार्यं वन्देऽहं योगदेशिकम् श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः. Okay, so what we have been hearing is that people are feeling overwhelmed by everything that is going on. And because of all of the sheer volume of everything that's going on, the tendency has been to shut down. If I'm connected and everything is so strong and so overwhelming and I am not able to handle it, then I have to protect myself by shutting down. Give me some apathy. I don't care what is going on. It's all right. However, apathy is something that's hard to contain in one area, and it's very easy to spread into other areas. And then we have uh, we risk losing our connection to all places. So, what is it that yoga has to say about this? That's the topic of what we're discussing today. I think that it's important to remember that yoga has two main steps, or I should say, if we look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, there are two clear steps that happen in the presentation. The first step involves addressing one's state, or we can talk about qualities, or the uh, the functioning of their human system. Chapter 2 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is largely addressing the tendency to go out of balance that happens as a result of our connections to the world. I remember when I was in elementary school, or maybe it's junior high, and you know, the science class inevitably presented, well, in the past, there was the idea that the world is made up of five elements, and these five elements combine to make up everything. And this is the foundation of science and how the world works. And I always remembered being puzzled at that structure or that explanation. So, how does that work? So, if you think that things are made up of five elements, what does that mean? And how do you make sense of the world, etc.? And it really wasn't until I started studying Ayurveda seriously that I realized, like, oh, what the five elements means is not really about space, wind, or air, you know, fire, water, earth, etc. It's that each one of these elements represents a category of qualities. Space is clear and infinite and non obstructing and present everywhere, subtle. Fire is hot, spreading, piercing, etc., like this, right? And so if you take these five elements, then you have five different categories of qualities. And those categories of qualities affect how your system functions in different ways. Space, wind are cold. When you get cold, what happens? Well, there's some shivering, there's a physicalness, there's a shivering in the body. If it gets too cold, then you start to lose some sensation in your fingers, in your toes. Um, there's a set of emotions that are cold: fear, nervousness, anxiety, isolation, etc. All these things are cold. But the opposite is true of heat. What happens when you start to get warm? Well, you start to sweat. Uh, there is a tendency towards more activity. Um, there's also uh, things like frustration, anger, control, jealousy. These are all very hot emotions, right? So the world in this system is a quality based place. And wherever, whatever qualities you connect to, those qualities increase in your mind and in your body. And when those qualities are increased, it changes the way that your system functions. So, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, chapter 2, is largely about coming to recognize the impact that different things, circumstances, relationships, etc., have on the way that your system functions. So, you know, the obvious ones are food and drink, our relationships, the places we go, etc. So, what Patanjali is advocating in chapter 2 is that we should be paying attention to the way that we feel, uh, think, respond, even perceive based on what we're connected to. And that we can then start to differentiate between things that take us away from uh, optimal functioning, away from uh, a balanced way of being, and cause us to have um, suffering. Right? And if we start to observe that and have a recognition of how things are affecting us, the next step will be to reduce the things that are not supporting us and to increase the things that are supporting us. This is a very simplified way, or perhaps it's a big overview way of looking at Patanjali's chapter 2. This is Kriya Yoga. There's some self observation, there's some recognition of how things are impacting us, there's taking of action to have a different experience. And also, if you look at the last part of the chapter 2, where he's talking about Ashtanga Yoga, these are specific connections that if you do them, if you increase them, then they have the tendency of supporting balance in your system. Right? So Ashtanga Yoga gives, at least in the second chapter, it gives 5 different steps. Of course, altogether there are 8, but it gives 5 different steps. They involve managing your relationships with other people, with yourself, with your body, with your breath, and with your senses. And essentially, what they are advocating for is that we intentionally create the relationship, the connection, the qualities that we want to experience. So rather than only being out there recognizing that I'm in contact with this person, and that every time I'm done having a meeting with them, I feel so drained or tired, or I feel so aggravated or unhappy, or whatever it may be. And then recognizing that, well, I'm going to try to meet with them less, or I'm going to reduce the number of times I see them, or whatever that may be. Um, Patanjali is saying, well, what is it that What is it that makes you feel this in a positive way with physical movements? Let me have you do move in this way or that way. Let me have you extend your breath in this way or that way as a way to positively support the qualities in the system that you want to have. Mm, okay. So, this is the first step, recognizing what are the qualities that I'm connected to and the impacts that they are having on me, and reducing the ones that have negative impact and increasing the ones that have positive impact. Increasing the ones that have positive impact also very explicitly means that we are intentionally creating some of those experiences. That's what practice is, right? Practice is a intentional creation of a set of qualities within us. When we're thinking about the overwhelm that leads to apathy that's happening in our societies now, a lot of this has to do with how much information we are connected to and what kind of information we're following. You know, it's a little bit like watching uh, a slow motion train wreck. Hard to look away. It's very something about it just pulls your attention and holds it, keeps you there. So if we're not able to have a little discipline in the way that we are allowing our attention to roam or what it's connecting to, then we're going to have a lot of difficulty influencing the way that we feel. Part of the explicit tactic of the United States current government is to quote, flood the zone with SHIT, right? So, what they're specifically trying to do is provide so much activity and so much information that it's overwhelming. And that overwhelm has the impact of making you numb to all of it and causing you to give up. So people have they have a twofold response to that. One is to, well, I got to be hyper vigilant. I got to be paying attention to everything and trying to do everything. And the other is to be completely shut down and not following any of it and not active in it, in any of it. And what I think we can learn from yoga, specifically the Yoga Sutras, is that there is a middle ground in which you're watching the way that you are connected to things and the way that you are consuming them and limiting the amount of exposure you have to the information or to the source, right? Um, that requires some discipline. And that discipline will be greatly supported by having your own practice or by, intentionally intentionally creating within yourself the feelings that you want to have. So there's so many different ways to do this, right? Exercise is one. Yoga is obviously the one that we would mainly recommend. There's what you eat. There's the relationships and the people that you're connected to, etc. So the first step here is to recognize the amount of connections you have and the specific locations that you have them, and then um, choose a level of engagement that is um, sustainable. All right. This is the first thing. Then the second step, if we look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the second step is um, about identity. It's about what are you? Who are you? So the general idea is that there is a place within each of us that has its own identity, which is separate from all of the patterns and experiences that we have developed over the course of our life, and which is a level of wisdom and understanding that is beyond anything that our intellect or emotions can muster. So, um, it's thought that this quality within us is subtle and that it is made easier to access by managing our state in a kind of um, balanced fashion. So, in other words, when we are drawn out of balance in a direction of uh, anxiety or fear or agitation, or sometimes it's possible to be drawn out of balance in the direction of shutting down and overwhelm and dullness, etc., that it's harder to access this part within us. And at that point, then the patterning that we have from our life histories, that will take over, and that will be the piece that is um, determining what action we take, where we go, and what we do. So step one is about recognizing the impact that things have on us and reducing the things that have negative impacts, increasing the things that have positive impact, and generally learning how to manage our moods, our the qualities of our system, the overall functioning like this. That's step one. The second step is within that, there is learning to listen to a voice within us that has understanding and um, knowing beyond anything that we ourselves have. And that voice is the voice that should be dependent on for um, determining the actions that we take and uh, whether or not we act, etc. So, this whole thing about um, how do you nurture relationships in terms of apathy, the first step is you have to really be careful about the qualities that you're engaging with so that you yourself don't become overwhelmed or extremely agitated or shut down, right? There has to be a manner that you are choosing the depth of your engagements. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you are able to listen internally to what it is that you are drawn to, what you are called to. Again, in a general sense, yoga is saying that it's a personal universe. Whatever is happening in the world is always being viewed through the individual lens of our own mind and body. And therefore, each of us will have a slightly different take on, or extremely different take on whatever is happening, because it's never just the thing, it's always the thing plus the personalization of our own lens. So, what that also means is that each and every one of us has a specific role to play in whatever situation it is that we are perceiving. The question is, how do you go about deciding what is the role that you are going to play? Is your anxiety deciding? Is your shutdown deciding? Is your frustration or jealousy deciding, etc.? Right? So the point of yoga's teachings are not, well, disconnect, go somewhere else, we must remove, etc. And they are not, well, make sure that you take on every make sure you take on every cause that is there and that you can do, and you should step forward and make it happen, etc. No, the the point here, what yoga's teachings are, maintain your the quality of your system so that you can listen internally. You can say listen to your heart, or listen to intuition, or listen to the knowing that arises when you're uh, quiet or when you're in a situation, and that this is the foundation that guides you in where you're going and what you're doing. So, if we're able to do this, then it will be clear what actions should be taken. Um, you know, that is a theoretical idea. Some people will say, yes, I'm doing that. However, it is still not clear. That is true. That happens. Yes. So the 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 piece to do there is practice. Change your state. Bring it back towards a place where you can listen. And sometimes it may not be time to take an action. So there's not any communication about what to do. You just have to wait. I think this is a general teachings. How do you nurture relationships in the face of apathy? Well, first of all, you have to be careful about the relationships that you are choosing. Because if you are choosing all relationships, then you will just be pulled in all the directions that those relationships are taking you. So for me personally, I have had to be very careful in the last years about how much I follow the news. Because when I follow the news, I start to get very upset. by all the things that are happening. And when I get upset, now my ability to listen internally to what is happening, what my own guidance is reduced. And then I must go and protest in the streets. Then I must go and uh, you know, uh, I want to talk to my friends about, like, can you believe blah 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 thing is happening. Okay, none of this is supportive of me, and neither is it really supportive of the people in my life, right? At the same time, it's not really correct for me to uh, hide. I can't look at anything. Please, whatever it is, don't tell me about the da 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 da, da, right? I, I should have some awareness of what is happening in my society and what other people are going through, etc. So there has to be some discipline on my part about what it is that I'm choosing to be in relationship with. If I'm able to have that discipline, then I have the availability in uh, my own space, my own relationships, to be present for the things that really matter in my life. If I'm connected to something that is really disturbing me, then it will be harder to be present for my wife, or for my child, or for my students, or for my colleagues, etc. Right? So at the same time, if I'm not connected to anything at all, this will also be shut down and not really worthwhile. I think those are my thoughts. Can I open the floor? Does somebody have a comment or a question? I'm vested by the power of Zoom to call on you.
Chase, I have a question. It's Virginia here.
Hi, Virginia, please.
So, one of the things that really stood out to me in what you said was you said something about, and this is my words, but I would love to hear you dive into this a little deeper. It's not about the thing that's occurring, it's also about the personalization of our own lens influencing how you see it. That's kind of my interpretation of it.
It's
Can, can,
nicely said.
can you talk more about that?
Sure. It's a great question. It's you know, I'm sure that all of us can experience this in different ways in our lives. Just that, let's say there's something that happens in the neighborhood, and you start talking with your neighbors about it, and you discover, like, oh, well, what I think is, and what she thinks is so different. And what the other neighbor thinks is, I would have never thought to think that about it, etc. Right? Well, it's the same event, but all these three people are having different views of it. And in the United States these days, that is quite apparent in the all the different ways that people are having in their political opinions. The same event is engendering so many different responses. And it's just demonstrating that each person has their own lens. And so it's never, objective knowledge is not really possible. What is possible is that there is an event, and your own lens is coloring it. So the event is always, in a way, personalized. And therefore, the event has meaning specifically for you that it might not have for someone else. Right? Um, and that is really important because the other piece that yoga is saying about why you're on the planet is that it's not really about the events that are happening. It's not really all the changes in materiality. It's not the events that are unfolding that is important. What is important is a way of being within all of that. And if we are if we are thinking about what yoga is saying, it's that there is a way of being which is possible to be experienced only by being in materiality and in relationship with materiality, but which is distinct from materiality. And the purpose of things happening and unfolding is not the things, it's to be able to differentiate what it is within us that's that's distinct from the events. I feel like I need to step back and explain it in a different way, which is from a yogic philosophical position, consciousness, spirit, soul are distinct from materiality, physical um, bodies, minds, etc. And that if it's when the two come together that the physical world manifests and starts to change and move. And the purpose of the physical world is to provide a, a lens or to provide a mirror where consciousness, spirit, soul, whatever word you want to use, um, is able to discover its own nature. And what prevents that from happening is that soul mistakenly identifies with the physicality, with the ideas, with the mind. And so when an event happens and we have a reaction and we identify with that reaction, etc., we're trapped within the mirror. We're not using the mirror as a way to discern the true nature of the soul. This this personalized take on each event, it's related to our own personal histories and to our ancestors, and um, but it also is the part that allows us to start to discern the difference between our material identities and uh, the the soul that is experiencing through that. So, this is the trap. Something happens, and I have a reaction to it, and I think that that reaction is um, right or real or and then somebody else doesn't have the same reaction to it, and I have trouble understanding that, and I want to reject them, or I want to get them to change their opinion, or to think more like me, etc. All of that is being trapped in the event. It's not to say that um, you don't have a role in the event, because, again, from yoga theory, you're present. That means you have a role. But what that role may be can only really be determined from your own conscience, your own intuition or knowing. And the key part of what we're trying to do is to find the stability and the stillness and the quiet within, while remaining within the busyness of the world. Virginia, do you have a follow up?
Oh my goodness, Chase, I was just about to say I have a follow-up question.
Great.
So, what I'm getting from what you're saying, and please, share with me, uh, how you interpret my interpretation, is that it seems like there's this kind of paradoxical occurrence, or that we might experience it as a bit paradoxical in our own minds, of like, so the thing happens, and then I'm having a reaction to it that is my perception through my own lens based on my past experiences and the meaning that I'm making of whatever has occurred, and also just the limited information perhaps that I have about the occurrence, which may be limited. It's not the fullness of the truth of the experience, it's just the pieces of information that I can see. But I think, like, the piece of it that is the most salient to me in terms of keeping my own serenity and peace and nervous system regulation in the face of my reaction is the detachment from the reaction, or perhaps the humbleness that there might be more than meets the eye, such that I can observe my reaction, like it's part of the experience, but it's not the whole experience. There's also like the observer part of me that's like, wow, I'm having a lot of feelings about this, right? And if I can have some awareness that those feelings that I'm having about the experience may be influencing the way that I'm seeing it, so that I can pause, and do my practices to nurture myself in going, wow, compassion for self. This is really challenging for me. Obviously, I'm, whatever the word is, triggered, or, what, all of that language, that you might use.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, I just feel like the consolation for me, and I'm just curious to hear from your own personal experience, is that when I have the awareness that I'm having a reaction, rather than just being in the reaction and thinking that that's all there is, that
Yeah.
feels like a win to me, to just have an awareness that I have a perception and it's not universal, and that I have some agency around opening myself up to the possibility that that perception can change, and also that I can soothe myself into helping be in wise mind. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think you've said it very nicely. And there's a big difference between the theory and the practice, right? So the theory is very attractive and very concise. We are not our bodies or our minds. We are perceiving through the body and the mind, and uh, you know this is um, developed in each of us to differing degrees. And this is why I was saying at the beginning that there are two steps of it. The first step involves the management of the quality of our system. And that is when you connect to certain qualities, those qualities increase in you. And when you um, connect to different other qualities, then those other qualities increase in you. And so, um, in order to be able to do this second part, which is to have the internal space, internal distance to recognize, oh, I'm having these feelings, as you so nicely said. It's important to manage the quality of our own system. Patanjali gives 5 uh, symptoms for a system out of balance. Dukkha, Daumanasya, Angamejayatma, Shvasa Prashvasaha, Vikshepa Saha Bhuvaha. This is first chapter, 31. And they are dukkha. There is some suffering. There's an emotional reaction that is not pleasant. Dharmanasya, it there's a negative view. I think this is going to end poorly. I see the end is near. Oh my God, society as we know it is finished, etc. Angam ajayatva means the physiology of your body does not work well. So you can't sleep. You have difficulty digesting, either too quickly or too slowly, you know, um, and all the other physiological issues that are there. Um, Shvasa, prashvasa. The breath is short and shallow. Inhale focused. So these things are happening when our system is out of balance. And the last one he gives is vikshepa. Vikshepa means scattered, dispersed, and it's describing the activity of the mind. It goes here and there, etc. So whenever we see any of that happening, what it means is that we have allowed the quality of our system to get out of balance. And I think that's really a useful way of thinking about what is going on in our system, is that it's the antenna. It's showing us is what is happening for us. And then in other places, Patanjali gives the qualities that we want to support. So the first one was dukkha. He says in the third chapter, in number 10, that if we establish um, we establish uh, a pattern of balance, containment is the word he uses, then we'll have complete peace, right? So peace will be the emotional uh, marker of balance. Daurmanasya means negative thinking. Well, he says in the second chapter in 41, the marker of a state of balance is Salmanasya. It's that the there are some positive thoughts that you can be positive about something. You think about that. It's what you're saying, Virginia, like the difference between negative thinking and positive thinking might not be the event at all. It might be completely our own system. Angam Ajayatva. Well, what does he say about asana? Sthira and sukha. Try to maintain in our physical bodies stability and comfort. So that is the marker for how we should practice asana. What are we doing every morning or twice a day or whatever it is? We are establishing stability and comfort in our physical bodies. That's like a foundation for uh, maintaining uh, optimum qualities in our system. Shvasa prashvasa, short and shallow and inhale focused, is the problem. What does he say in 250? Dirga sukshma. What should happen with the breath? It should become long and subtle. And then, of course, the initial definition of yoga is the opposite of scattered and dispersed. It's that the mind is contained. Yogaha, chitta, vritti, nirodha. Yoga is the containing or the restraint of mental activities. So, what is practice? In so many ways, practice is a qualities based system. You're working to keep the dominance of certain qualities in your system that support feeling peaceful, having a positive outlook, having stability and comfort in your physical body, having a long, subtle breath, and a focusable, directable mind. But those things are setting the foundation for the second step, which is recognizing this subtle internal voice. Call it knowing, call it intuition, call it Jesus, call it God, call it Allah, call it, Yahweh, call it Krishna, whatever it is that's within you that is speaking to you in this different quality. It's so helpful to have a system that is contained and balanced to be able to hear that. And then when we hear that, then there's the possibility of right action or correct action. Virginia, I think you did a nice job of articulating, and the struggles are different in different stages of the path, right? So, the first thing we have to do is we have to work on developing some changing the qualities of our system, developing some containment, developing a focusable mind, developing, positive or useful emotions within us. Those things take some time, um, and they're supported or made more difficult by the environments that we're in, which is part of choosing which environments that we want to continue being in, etc. Anything else?
Gratitude for this opportunity to make these discussions happen. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for asking. Thanks for participating. I really appreciate it. Super. So we'll do a little bit of chanting to close, and thank you all for coming. And I will see you again soon. Kagena vacha manasendriyaiva buddhyatmana va prakriti subhavat करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि सर्वं श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु. Thanks, everybody.